Tier lists in Yu-Gi-Oh! Put the best decks at Tier 1. However, sometimes there is a deck that is so much stronger than every other deck that it transcends the regular tiers and becomes Tier 0. Many people argue over what exactly Tier 0 means, but most agree on the decks that are in that upper echelon. However, I want to talk about a deck that transcends even the best of the best, and even in a no-ban list style format is able to stand at the top of the mountain. If you know anything about Yu-Gi-Oh! You likely already know about the deck I'm talking about, none other than Tearlament. But before we can get to that, consider subscribing. I'm making tons of content like this, and if you end up not liking it, you can always unsubscribe later. Let's start by explaining that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has 3 different formats, technically, that get new cards. The OCG, or Original Card Game, which is mostly Japan and neighboring regions, the TCG, or Trading Card Game, basically everywhere else in the world, and Master Duel, which is the official online simulator for the game. Due to the way releases work in Yu-Gi-Oh!, the OCG almost always gets the newest cards first, followed by the TCG, then Master Duel. So by the time the cards even come to the English-speaking world, we already know what is good and what isn't. Now, let's go back to the release of Power of the Elements, one of, if not the most, impactful set in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! History. In this set, we receive support that made forgotten decks meta, like Exo-Sister Martha or Mathmech Circular, powerful generic cards to add to existing decks like the Therions, and not just one Tier 0 deck, but 2. Before we can talk about Tier, we have to talk about Spright. This new archetype focused on level, link, and rank 2 monsters, special summoning themselves from hand and easily pivoting into the myriad of extra deck options to out practically any problem. Pair that with the in-engine negates of Red and Carrot, the insanity that is Gigantic Spright using a link monster for Xe material, and Elf being able to reborn anything on both turns. And you get one of the craziest decks of all time. Now, when this deck released in the OCG, the writing was on the wall. This deck was good. They still had cards like Halqifibrax and Totally Awesome to give the deck even more nonsense. Not to mention Maxi is a level 2. This deck was powerful enough to get 60% representation of top cut, which is generally considered the cutoff for a Tier 0 deck. However, as you can see, there was one other deck that was able to compete with this deck. Tearlament. Tearlament was still incomplete at this point, but that didn't stop this deck. Tearlament is a deck that focuses on sending cards from the deck to the grave to trigger powerful effects, like fusion summoning, searching, or returning cards to the hand. Yeah, this deck was able to fusion summon using monsters in the grave. All you had to do was send one of these 3 Tearlament monsters to the grave to trigger their effects. Then you could fuse into anything, as long as you used that monster for the fusion summon. Meaning, just like how Spright could use the 2s as a toolbox to deal with problems, Tier could use fusion monsters. On top of that, because they focused on sending cards from deck to the grave, they also were able to use the insane amount of cards that have powerful graveyard effects in tandem with their own cards to get even more advantage. And I haven't even mentioned the fusion monsters they actually had at this point. Kit Kalos is one of the best extenders in any deck ever, requiring basically any 2 tier names, and on-summon searching or sending a card. Meaning, if you summoned this card on the opponent's turn, you still had the ability to get another fusion summon out of it. But that's not all. On top of that, you could send a monster you control to the grave to summon a tier monster from hand or grave. Oh, and if Kit is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you get to send the top 5 cards of your deck to the grave, aka Mill 5. So you send Kit to the grave to reborn a Tearlament monster, then just keep going and going and going, and you get the point. However, this is just the first fusion monster they had. The second is just as good. Kaleidoheart is a powerhouse. On summon, or when an Aqua monster, not just a tier monster, is sent to the graveyard, you can target a card on the field and shuffle it into the deck. That's one of the strongest forms of removal in the game. On top of that, if this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, whether your own or your opponent's, you can trigger the effect to reborn him, then send another tier card to the grave. Meaning, if you don't properly deal with this card, you could potentially allow tier to get their whole combo going again. Now, this is just the first wave of support, and it's about to get a whole lot worse with the release of Magnificent Mavens. But before we do that, we gotta talk about the TCG. In the TCG, Spright was not nearly as dominant as it was in the OCG, mostly due to the fact that a lot of the power cards were banned, like Maxi and Halqifibrax. This made way for a more combo variant of Tearlament to take up more space in the top tables, using the dangers to draw cards and send tier names to the grave by card effect, triggering their effects. And you could just pair the two archetypes together, using the insane amount of bodies that tier can produce to end on fusions paired with the negates of Spright. Now, back to Magnificent Mavens. This set gave us more powerful support for fan-favorite decks like Hero and Sky Striker, and, of course, the Ishizu monsters. Kelbeck, Agido, Mudora, and Keldo. All of these cards are either banned or limited to this day. Both Kelbeck and Agido, when sent to the graveyard by card effect, mill 5 to 10 cards from both players, and are both banned because of this. Imagine playing against this deck and half of your deck just disappears. However, Mudora and Keldo aren't much better. They can banish themselves from field or grave on either player's turn at any point to shuffle 3 to 5 cards from the grave back into the deck, meaning all those cards you had sent to the graveyard aren't even going to stay there. Now, pair this with the Tearlament monsters, and you may start to see the issue. Kelbeck and Agido allowed you to combo at almost any point for basically nothing, just sending the entire deck to the grave, while Mudora and Keldo could not just disrupt the opponent tier cards, but also could protect your own Tearlament monsters. But that's not all, folks. We still have one more set to talk about. Darkwing Blast. This set just solidified the power of Tearlament, because we didn't just get one new card, not 2, not even 3, but 4 new tier cards, all of which were just as crazy as the last. One, an in-archetype MST that triggers tier and Ishizu monsters, another way to special summon from deck or trigger a fusion summon, but the two that matter most are the new fusion and the card that allows you to mill more cards, not just on your turn. Let's start with Scream. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you get a tier trap card, which are all very strong. And if it's face up and a monster is summoned while you have a tier on field, or if you summon a tier, you get to mill 3 cards, and your opponent's monsters lose 500 attack. And the new fusion. Rukalos, just requiring Kit and another tier monster, and in return giving you a special summon negate. Don't worry, she also comes back if sent to the grave. However, this set also gave us a counter to tier in the form of Bestials, monsters designed to banish a light or dark monster from grave and giving you an extra body on the field. Too bad they were also starters for tier. Thanks, Beatrice. Rest in piss. Man, just look at how dominant this deck was. Eventually, this deck was taken care of, but it wasn't on the first ban list, but the second, more insane ban list, that the deck started to die off. Or so we thought. In every format, including Master Duel, which we haven't even talked about yet, this deck still survived a slaughtering of its cards. In the OCG, they just took a hiatus as Cash took over, but as soon as Cash was also dead, they came back with a vengeance. In the TCG, they just pivoted to the 3rd or 4th best deck, and even without the Ishizu Millers or Kit. But before we can finish this story of tier, we must talk about the last format that Tearlament dominated. Master Duel. Master Duel received the Ishizu monsters first, but before tier came to the game, they had been limited slightly. But the Tearlament cards weren't as lucky. Before even being released in the game, there was a ban list that limited a lot of the power cards in Tearlament. Planet to 1. Kit to 1, and every fusion name to 2. Even with these preemptive hits to the deck, it was still tier 0. Even in a game so different like Master Duel, where it's all best of 1, having cards like Havness to play on the opponent's turn meant that you were never really at a disadvantage. But after many ban lists, all skirting around the issue, they eventually banned Merly, Planet, and the Ishizu Millers, and limited the Shufflers and Havness, giving the deck way less ways to start playing and few names with which to fuse with. However, not before it was the best deck by far at 2023 Worlds. Master Duel Worlds is very different, so the representation can be weird, but every team was playing tier and something to counter tier. But don't worry, that isn't the only Worlds won by Tearlament. Because the next year, Jesse Cotton played another Tearlament deck, almost exclusively, and his team ended up winning Worlds with it. It was the 3rd most represented deck at that Worlds as well, with a very good win rate for such an event. And after all of that, Tearlament continues on to this day. As more and more cards are released that want to be in the grave, tier will continue to get stronger and stronger. And if there is ever a no ban list event taking place, you know what deck will be there, taking up the most spots at the top. Thank you for watching, and stay frosty.